Ambassador Kethrel stood before the large window of Relay Station, Omega 7. His 4 eyes watched the darkness of space. Something was coming. Something massive. The human ship appeared slowly from behind a nearby moon. At first, it looked like a small dot. Then it grew larger, and larger, and larger still. The USS Perseverance was a Titan-class carrier. 12 kilometers of gray metal and blinking lights. It was so big that it could swallow the greatest warships of the Vespari Dominion without even noticing. Kethrel felt his insect-like body shiver as he watched it approach. His assistant, a young female named Sylveth, walked up beside him. Her antennae were shaking with fear. "Ambassador," she said quietly, "surely we are not expected to go inside that thing?" Kethrel made a clicking sound with his mandibles. It was a sign of discomfort among his people. "The humans have invited representatives from all 12 species of the Galactic Council. They want to show us their ship. They call it a gesture of friendship and openness." "But the warnings," Sylveth whispered. "Everyone knows the warnings. I know them too." Every species in the galaxy knew about human Titan ships. For 300 years, since humans first arrived among the stars, there had been an unspoken rule. A rule that nobody wrote down, but everybody followed. The rule was simple. Never go inside a human Titan-class vessel. There were no official reports. No documented incidents. Just stories. Whispered tales passed between traders in dark corners of space stations. Rumors shared by diplomats over private meals. Warnings given by soldiers to their younger comrades. Those who entered human Titan ships came back different. They were quieter. They looked haunted. They refused to speak about what they had seen inside. When asked, they would simply shake their heads and walk away. The Vorthic Empire had refused every invitation to board these vessels. They always found some excuse. The crystalline hegemony claimed their bodies could not survive the environment inside human ships. Everyone knew this was a lie, but nobody challenged it. Even the mighty Kreth warriors, who feared nothing in battle, somehow always had other duties when such invitations came. But Ambassador Kethrel could not refuse. The humans had asked for him by name. Saying no would damage relations between his people and humanity. It would be a diplomatic disaster. So here he was, watching the largest ship he had ever seen slowly move toward the station. "Prepare my shuttle," he told Sylveth. "I will go alone. There is no need for you to come. Ambassador, I cannot let you go by yourself. It is my duty to accompany you." Kethrel looked at his young assistant. He could see the fear in her eyes, but he could also see determination. She was loyal, perhaps too loyal for her own good. "Very well," he said, "but stay close to me. And if I tell you to leave, you leave. No arguments." The shuttle ride to the Perseverance took only 15 minutes, but to Kethrel, it felt like hours. As they got closer, the ship grew even more impossibly large. He could now see details on its surface. Gun ports the size of buildings. Sensor arrays bigger than his entire shuttle. Hangar bays that glowed with orange light and movement. So much movement. Through the windows of the ship, he could see humans walking through corridors. Thousands of them. Maybe tens of thousands. Small fighter craft launched from the hangars and flew patrol patterns around the larger vessel. Other shuttles moved in and out, carrying supplies and personnel. This was not just a warship, Kethrel realized. This was something else entirely. Something his mind struggled to understand. "It is like a city," Sylveth said in amazement. "A floating city." She was right. The Perseverance was not a vessel. It was a civilization contained within metal walls. A piece of humanity, cut free from any planet and set loose among the stars. Their shuttle entered one of the smaller hangar bays. Even this small bay was enormous. Dozens of other craft sat in neat rows. Human workers in orange suits moved between them, checking systems and loading supplies. When Kethril stepped off the shuttle, he was greeted by a human female. She had gray hair and deep lines on her face that spoke of many years of life. But her eyes were sharp and intelligent. She wore a uniform covered in symbols that Kethril did not recognize. "Ambassador Kethril," she said with a warm smile. "Welcome aboard the Perseverance. I am Captain Elena Vasquez. I will personally guide you during your visit." Kethril bowed in the traditional Vespari way. "Thank you, Captain. Your ship is most impressive." "She is old but reliable," Vasquez said, patting a nearby wall with obvious affection. 43 years of service and still going strong. Please follow me. The other ambassadors are already gathering in the diplomatic quarter." As they walked through the corridors, Kethril observed everything. The walls were clean but showed signs of age. Small scratches here and there. Patches where repairs had been made. This ship had seen much use over its long life, but something else caught his attention. On the walls, at regular intervals, there were small metal plates. Each plate had words carved into it. Names, dates, sometimes a short phrase. Kethril did not stop to read them, but he counted them as they walked. 10, 20, 50, 100. They were everywhere. "Captain," he finally asked, "what are these plates on the walls?" Vasquez glanced at one as they passed. Her expression changed for just a moment. Something sad flickered in her eyes before she hid it again behind her professional smile. "Those are memorial markers, Ambassador. They honor crew members who served on this ship and have passed away. There are so many of them." "Yes, 43 years is a long time. Many have served here. Many have died here. We remember all of them." They continued walking in silence. But now Kethril could not stop seeing the markers. They were on every wall, in every corridor. Some were old and faded. Others looked new, the metal still shining. This ship carried its dead with it. Not their bodies, but their names. Their memories. The weight of everyone who had ever lived and died within these metal walls. Kethril felt something cold settle in his stomach. For the first time, he began to understand why others came back from these vessels. Disturbed. This was not just a city floating in space. It was something more. Something that his people had no word for, and he was only beginning to see it. That night, in his guest quarters, Kethril could not sleep. He lay in the specially prepared bed and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear the soft hum of the ship's engines. A constant heartbeat that never stopped. On the wall of his room, there was a small window. Through it, he could see stars drifting slowly past. The ship was moving through space, carrying him and 60,000 humans toward destinations unknown. 60,000 humans. Living, working, dying, and being remembered. What had he gotten himself into? Tomorrow, the real tour would begin. Tomorrow, he would see more of this strange vessel and its even stranger crew. And somehow, Kethril knew that when he finally left this ship, he would be one of those haunted souls who refused to speak of what they had witnessed. The question was, would he understand why? The tour began the next morning. Captain Vasquez gathered the small group of alien ambassadors in a beautiful room with soft lighting and comfortable furniture. There were representatives from 5 different species. Each one had their own special area with the right temperature and air for their bodies. Kethril noticed that all of them looked nervous. They tried to hide it, but he could see it in their movements. The way the Orlathi delegate kept touching his breathing mask. How the Vorthic ambassador stood stiffly near the exit. Even the normally fearless Kreth warrior seemed uncomfortable, They all knew the stories. They all wondered what they would find. "Welcome, honored guests," Captain Vasquez said warmly. "Today I will show you our home. Not just the military sections, but the real Perseverance. The place where our people live." The Kreth warrior made a confused sound. "Live? This is a warship. Soldiers do not live on warships. They serve on them." Vasquez smiled patiently. "For your people, perhaps. But Titan-class vessels are designed for very long missions. 5 years, 10 years, sometimes even longer. We cannot ask our crew to leave behind everything they love for so long. So instead, we bring their lives with them." She led them out of the diplomatic quarter and into the main sections of the ship. Not the first thing Kethril noticed was the noise. Not the mechanical sounds of engines and systems. No, this was different. This was the sound of life. Voices talking. Children laughing. Music playing from somewhere far away. Children. There were children on this warship. They passed a large window that looked down into an enormous open space. Kethril stopped walking and stared. Below him was a park. An actual park with grass and trees and a small stream running through it. Human children ran and played on the grass. Adults sat on benches and watched them. Some kind of small animal with 4 legs ran between the trees, chasing a ball. "This is the central garden," Vasquez explained. "Every Titan-class ship has one. 12 acres of green space. Real soil brought from Earth. Real trees that have been growing here for decades. Our people need nature. We cannot survive long without it." The Vorthic ambassador made a dismissive noise. "Wasteful. This space could hold more weapons. More soldiers." "Perhaps," Vasquez agreed. "But what would those soldiers be fighting for? Empty metal corridors? Cold rooms with no life? Our people fight harder when they have something real to protect. Something to remind them of home." They continued walking. Vasquez showed them the hydroponics bays where food was grown under artificial lights. The water recycling systems that could keep the ship supplied for 100 years. The hospitals that could treat any injury or illness. The schools where children learned history and science and mathematics. Schools. This warship had schools. Kethril watched through a window as a human female stood before a group of young ones. Behind her was a holographic display showing the planets of some distant solar system. She was teaching them about astronomy, about the very stars their ship sailed through. "The children born here," Kethril asked, "do they ever see a planet? Do they ever walk on solid ground that does not move?" "Some do," Vasquez said. "When we dock at stations or friendly worlds, families can take leave. But many children grow up entirely on the ship. To them, the Perseverance is home. They know nothing else." "That is sad," said the Alathi delegate through his translator. Vasquez shook her head. "They do not see it that way. They have everything they need here. Family, friends, education, purpose. Some of them eventually leave to live on planets. Others stay and raise their own families on the ship. The choice is theirs." As they walked through more corridors, Kethril kept noticing the memorial plates. They were everywhere. Some were grouped together in small shrines with flowers and photographs. Others stood alone on walls, quiet and dignified, but there was something else he started to notice. Something beyond the plates. Paintings, murals, works of art that covered entire walls. One mural showed a massive space battle. Human ships fought against strange alien vessels that Kethril did not recognize. The painting was beautiful but terrible. Ships exploded in silence. Bodies floated in the void. And in the center, a Titan-class vessel just like this one burned as it continued the fight. "What is this?" Kethril asked, stopping before the mural. Vasquez's face grew serious. "The Battle of Kepler's Reach. 97 years ago, a hostile species attacked one of our colony worlds without warning. The Titan-class ship Unconquerable responded. She fought for 3 days, even after she was fatally damaged, holding the line until reinforcements arrived. 4,000 of her crew died, but the colony survived. And you put this here? On the walls where everyone can see it? We put it here because everyone must see it. We do not hide our losses, Ambassador. We display them. We teach our children about them. We make sure that every person on this ship knows the price that was paid to keep them safe. The Kreth warrior looked uncomfortable. Among his people, defeats were shameful things to be forgotten. Victories were celebrated. Losses were buried, but humans did the opposite. They carried their wounds openly. Like badges of honor. The tour continued. They saw theaters where humans watched entertainment together. Sports arenas where they competed in strange games. Restaurants where they shared meals. Temples where they practiced dozens of different religions. And always everywhere, the memorials. The names. The faces of the dead watching from photographs and paintings and holographic displays. By the end of the day, Kethral was exhausted. Not physically, but mentally. His mind was full of new information, new ideas, things he had never considered before. That evening, he sat alone in one of the ship's observation lounges. The room was quiet and dark. Through the massive window, he could see the stars slowly moving past. The ship's engines hummed their endless song. An elderly human woman entered the room. She was small and bent with age, her hair white as snow. She carried a small pot with a flowering plant inside. "Forgive me," she said when she saw Kethral. "I did not know anyone was here. I can come back later." "No, please, stay. I am only watching the stars." The woman smiled and sat down in a chair near the window. She placed the flowering plant on a small table beside her. "Are you one of the alien ambassadors?" she asked. "I am. My name is Kethral. I am Margaret. I have lived on this ship for 62 years. My mother brought me here when I was a child. She served in engineering until she died. I am sorry for your loss." Margaret shook her head gently. "It was 30 years ago. But thank you. She is remembered. That is what matters." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Kethral asked a question that had been forming in his mind all day. "Margaret, how do you bear it? All the loss, all the death. You carry it with you everywhere. Does it not become too heavy?" The old woman looked at him with eyes that had seen many decades of life among the stars. "It is heavy," she admitted. "Some days very heavy. But we carry it together. Every person on this ship shares the weight. And we carry it because we must. Because if we put it down, if we forget, then all those people died for nothing." She paused and looked out at the stars. "The dead gave us their tomorrows, Ambassador. The least we can do is remember their yesterdays." Kethral had no response. He simply sat with the old human woman and watched the stars drift past, thinking about weight and memory and the strange species that refused to let go of either. Tomorrow, he would ask to see more. Not the pretty parts. The real ship. He was not sure he was ready for what he would find, but he had to know. On the third day, Captain Vasquez came to Kethral's quarters before sunrise. "Ambassador," she said quietly, "there is something I would like to show you. Something very few outsiders have ever seen. But after watching you these past days, I believe you are ready." Kethral rose from his sleeping platform. He had barely slept. His mind was too full of everything he had witnessed. "What is this place you wish to show me?" "We call it the Sanctum. It is the spiritual heart of this ship." Of all Titan-class ships, Kethral had heard the word whispered among the crew. They spoke of the Sanctum with respect and something close to fear. Not fear of danger, but fear of emotion. The way one might speak of a place too sacred for casual discussion. I would be honored to see it. Vasquez led him through the ship. They traveled down, away from the populated areas, away from the noise and activity. The corridors grew quieter. The lights became softer. The few humans they passed walked slowly and spoke in whispers. Finally, they reached a simple door. It had no special decorations, no guards, just a small plaque that read, "The Sanctum, remember." Vasquez paused before opening the door. "What you will see inside may be difficult," she said. "Take your time. There is no hurry here." She opened the door. The room was not large. Perhaps enough space for 100 beings standing close together. But the moment Catherall entered, he felt as if he had walked into something infinite. The walls were covered in names, not plates, not screens. The names were carved directly into the metal walls themselves. Millions of them. Tiny letters arranged in perfect lines that stretched from floor to ceiling. Every surface that could hold a name held one. Some areas were so old that the names had been recarved as the metal wore away. Others were fresh, the cuts still sharp and new. Cathrill's legs grew weak. He stepped forward and touched the wall. His fingers traced over names he could not pronounce, lives he would never know. "Every human who has ever died in space," Vasquez said softly. "From the first astronauts who gave their lives in primitive rockets to the crew members we lost last month in a maintenance accident. Every single one is here." "This is impossible," Cathrall whispered. "There must be millions. Tens of millions. 47,300,092. As of this morning. The number grows larger every day." Cathrall looked around the room in disbelief. The names stretched into shadow. They covered every surface. They surrounded him like ghosts made visible. In the center of the room stood something that drew his attention. A small pedestal holding a transparent container. Inside the container burned a single flame. It flickered gently, as if breathing. "The eternal vigil," Vasquez explained. "Every Titan-class ship carries one. The flame is never allowed to go out. It has been burning continuously for 247 years. How is that possible? When a new Titan is built, a flame is taken from an existing ship to light the new vigil. When the old ship is retired, its flame is merged back into another. Every vigil contains fire that connects back to the first flame, lit on the Un's Hope, humanity's first true starship." Cathrall stared at the gentle fire. It seemed so small, so fragile, yet it represented an unbroken chain spanning centuries. "The flame is a promise," Vasquez continued. "As long as it burns, we remember. As long as even one human ship carries the vigil, none of these names will be forgotten." Cathrall's legs finally gave out. He sank to his knees before the wall of names. He had never felt so small in his life. Not because of the size of human ships. Not because of their weapons or their numbers. Because of their memory, his people. The Vespari had been traveling the stars for 8,000 years. In that time, they had lost count of how many had died in space. They did not record such things. Death was part of life. The dead were honored briefly, then released to join the cosmic cycle. Individual names were forgotten within generations, but humans remembered every single one. They carved their names into walls and carried them between stars. They kept flames burning for centuries just to honor. A promise made to the dead. This was what terrified the other species. Not human weapons, though those were formidable. Not human numbers, though they bred faster than most. Not even human adaptability, though they survived in places that killed other species. It was this commitment, this refusal to let go. "You carry all of them," Cathrall said, his voice shaking. Every human who ever reached for the stars. You carry them with you always. We do, Vasquez said. They earned the right to be remembered. We will not take that from them. But the weight. How do you move forward with such burden? Vasquez walked to stand beside him. She looked at the names with an expression he had never seen on any being before. Pride, sorrow, determination, love, all mixed together into something he had no word for. We do not see them as a burden. Ambassador. We see them as a foundation. Every name on this wall represents someone who gave something so that we could be here today. Their sacrifices built the path we walk on. Their blood waters the stars we call home. She touched a section of the wall. My grandmother's name is here. She died defending a convoy from pirates when my mother was just a child. I never met her, but I know her name. I know her story. And when I face difficult decisions, I ask myself what she would think of my choices. The dead guide the living, Kethrel said slowly. Always. They are not gone as long as we remember them. And we will never stop remembering. Kethrel stood slowly. He turned in a circle, looking at the walls covered in names. 47 million souls watching from beyond death, waiting to be joined by millions more. An ever-growing family of the fallen. And he understood, finally, why no species boarded these ships and returned unchanged. This was not just a vessel. It was a temple, a tomb, a promise made visible in metal and fire. Humans did not fight for territory or resources. Not really. They fought because 10,000 years of ancestors were watching. They fought because giving up would mean betraying every name on these walls. They fought because the dead had given everything, and the living owed them nothing less than their absolute best. A species like that could not be defeated. Not truly. You could kill them. You could destroy their ships and burn their worlds. But as long as even one human remained to remember, to carry the names and keep the flame, the dead would continue to demand more from the living, and the living would answer. Kethrel stood in the sanctum for a long time. He read names until his eyes hurt. He watched the eternal flame dance in its container. He listened to the silence of 47 million souls. And when he finally left, he was no longer the same being who had entered. He understood now. He understood everything. And tomorrow, he would return to the Galactic Council with a warning that would change the way every species looked at humanity forever. Not because humans were dangerous, because they were unstoppable, and they would never, ever forget. On the second day, Kethrel made a request. Captain Vasquez, he said during breakfast, I wish to see more of your ship. Not the diplomatic sections, not the places you show to visitors. I want to see the real Perseverance. The other ambassadors looked at him with surprise. Some of them looked relieved that someone else had asked. Others looked horrified that anyone would want to go deeper into this strange vessel. Captain Vasquez studied Kethrel for a long moment. Something changed in her expression. A kind of respect, perhaps. Or maybe recognition. Are you certain, Ambassador? Not everyone finds the deeper sections comfortable. I am certain. I came here to understand. I cannot understand from the surface. Vasquez nodded slowly. Very well. But you will come alone. The others may continue the regular tour if they wish. The other ambassadors quickly agreed to stay with the regular program. Kethrel saw the relief in their eyes. They did not want to know. They were happy with the mystery remaining unsolved. But Kethrel could not live with not knowing. His curiosity was too strong. Vasquez led him through corridors that grew more functional and less decorative. The walls here were bare metal. The lights were simple and bright. This was the working part of the ship, where the real business happened. They passed through the engineering sections. Massive machines hummed and pulsed with energy. Human workers in protective suits moved between the equipment, checking readings and making adjustments. The heat was intense, even in the cooled corridor where Kethral walked. The main reactor is one deck below us, Vasquez explained. It produces enough power to light a small moon. But it also requires constant attention. 3 shifts of engineers working around the clock, every day for 43 years. That is dedication, Kethral said. That is necessity. If the reactor fails, everyone dies. Our engineers understand this. They treat their work as sacred. They moved on to the armories. Room after room of weapons and equipment. Enough to supply an army for years. Rifles, pistols, explosives, combat armor, vehicles. And beyond that, the heavy weapons, missiles, bombs, devices that Kethral did not recognize but knew must be terrible. You carry enough weapons to conquer a world, he observed. We carry enough to defend our people, no matter what we face. But it was not the weapons that affected Kethral most deeply. It was the archives. The room was circular and stretched upward through 3 full decks of the ship. The walls were covered with screens that displayed images, text, and data. In the center was a large console where several humans worked quietly. This is the historical archives, Vasquez said. Every Titan-class ship carries one. It contains the complete recorded history of human spacefaring. Kethral looked around in amazement. All of it? All of it. Every mission. Every discovery. Every battle. Every death. Every birth. Every success and every failure. If something happened to a human in space, it is recorded here. She walked to a section of the wall and touched a control. The screens changed to show images of destruction. A planet burning. Cities reduced to ash. Millions of lights going dark. The nuclear wars of Earth, Vasquez said quietly. Nearly 400 years ago. Humans almost destroyed themselves before we ever reached the stars. We came very close to extinction. Kethral felt cold. And you keep these records? The memories of near extinction? We keep everything, Ambassador. The beautiful and the ugly. The victories and the atrocities. We do not choose which parts of our history to remember. We remember all of it. She changed the display again. Now it showed a list of names. Hundreds of them scrolling past. Then thousands. Then tens of thousands. These are the humans who died in the first wave of interstellar colonization. Disease, equipment failure, hostile environments, accidents. 37,000 people who left Earth and never came home. So many, Kethral whispered. And we remember every single one. Their names. Their faces. Their stories. They are not just numbers to us. They were people with families and dreams. They gave everything so that we could reach the stars. Among Kethral's people, the Vespari, history was treated very differently. Shameful events were erased. Embarrassing leaders were forgotten. The past was carefully edited to show only strength and success. The idea of preserving failure, of carrying every dark moment into the future, it was almost impossible to understand. Why? He asked. Why keep the painful memories? Would it not be easier to forget? Vasquez turned to face him directly. Her eyes were serious and sad. Easier? Yes. Wiser? No. We keep our painful memories because they teach us. Every mistake we record is a lesson for the future. Every failure we remember is a warning for those who come after. If we forgot the nuclear wars, we might repeat them. If we forgot the colonies we lost, we might make the same errors again. She paused and looked at the scrolling names. And beyond that, we owe it to them. The dead deserve to be remembered. Their suffering should mean something. If we forget them, their sacrifices become meaningless. We cannot allow that. They left the archives and walked through more corridors. Cathral's mind was full of thoughts he could not organize. Everything he had believed about humans was being challenged. He had thought they were aggressive, warlike, dangerous. And they were those things. But they were also something else. They were witnesses. Keepers of memory. Carriers of the past. They stopped at a small garden tucked into a corner of the ship. It was nothing like the grand central garden. Just a tiny space with a few plants and a bench. But sitting on the bench was the old woman from the night before. Margaret Dot. She was placing flowers before a holographic portrait. The portrait showed a young human male with a bright smile. "Forgive me," Cathral said. "I do not wish to disturb you." Margaret looked up and smiled gently. "You are not disturbing me. Please, come sit." Cathral sat beside her on the bench. Vasquez stood quietly nearby. "Who is he?" Cathral asked, looking at the portrait. "My great-grandfather. He died defending a colony I have never seen, in a war that ended before I was born. But I remember him. We all remember. You never met him, but you bring him flowers? I come here every week. I tell him about my life, about my children and grandchildren. I want him to know that his sacrifice was not wasted, that because he fought and died, I exist. My family exists. We are his legacy." Cathral struggled with this concept. Among his people, the dead were honored for a time, and gradually forgotten as new generations came. By the time a great-grandparent was being discussed, few Vespari would remember their names. But this human woman maintained a relationship with a man who died before she was born. "How do you bear it?" he asked, echoing his question from the night before. "The weight of so much loss?" Margaret smiled sadly. "The weight is not a burden, Ambassador. It is a gift. Every name we carry, every face we remember, adds to who we are. We are not diminished by their loss. We are expanded by their memory." She touched the holographic portrait gently. "My great-grandfather gave his tomorrows so that I could have mine. The least I can do is give him a few minutes of my today." Cathral sat in silence for a long time. He watched the flowers sway gently in the recycled air. He looked at the face of a young man who had died generations ago, but was still loved, and slowly he began to understand. Humans did not carry their dead because they had to. They carried them because they wanted to. Because to forget would be a betrayal. Because every loss added to their determination to ensure that no more losses would be meaningless. This was not weakness. This was strength of a kind that Cathral had never imagined, and he had not yet seen the heart of it. That would come tomorrow, and nothing in his long life, as a diplomat would prepare him for what he would find. The Galactic Council chambers were filled with representatives from every major species in known space. 12 civilizations, each with their own history, their own culture, their own way of seeing the universe. They had gathered to hear Ambassador Cathral's report on his visit to the human, Titan-class vessel. Cathral stood at the central podium and looked out at the assembled delegates. He saw curiosity in some faces, suspicion in others. The Kreth warlord looked bored, as he always did during diplomatic proceedings. The crystalline hegemony representative shimmered with impatience. They all wanted to know the secret, the mystery that had haunted the galaxy for 300 years. "Distinguished delegates," Cathral began, "you invited me here to explain what I witnessed aboard the human ship Perseverance. You want to know why no species enters these vessels and returns unchanged. You want to know what secret they contain." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I will tell you. But I warn you that what I say will change how you see humanity forever." The chamber fell completely silent. "Many of you believe that human power comes from their weapons. Their Titan-class ships carry enough firepower to destroy fleets. This is true. But this is not why they are dangerous. The Kreth warlord leaned forward slightly. Weapons were a language he understood. Others believe their power comes from their numbers. Humans breed faster than most species. They spread across the galaxy like water filling cracks in stone. This is also true. But this is not why they are dangerous either. Cathrol took a deep breath. Their power comes from their memory. Their absolute, unwavering refusal to forget. Confused looks passed between the delegates. Memory? What did memory have to do with military power? When I walked through the Perseverance, I found something I never expected. I found a ship full of ghosts. Not real ghosts, but the memory of everyone who had ever served, lived, or died on that vessel. Their names were everywhere, carved into walls, displayed in gardens, painted in murals, spoken in daily conversations. Cathrol activated a holographic display. Images from his visit appeared in the air above the council chamber. The memorial plates, the murals of ancient battles, the archives with their endless records. This is the Central Archives. Every Titan-class ship carries one. It contains the complete recorded history of human spacefaring. Not just victories, everything. Their defeats, their failures, their greatest shamus. They hide nothing from themselves. The Vorthic ambassador made a disgusted sound. This is weakness. Our people do not display our failures for all to see. I thought the same, Cathrol said. I was wrong. He changed the display to show the sanctum. The walls of names. The eternal flame. This is the sanctum. The spiritual heart of every Titan-class vessel. 47 million names are carved into these walls. Every human who has ever died in space, from their first primitive astronauts to crew members lost yesterday. Every single one is remembered. Their names will be carried between stars for as long as human ships fly. The chamber was very quiet now. In the center burns a flame that has never gone out for 247 years. It connects every Titan-class ship back to humanity's first starship. It is a promise that as long as the flame burns, no name will be forgotten. Cathrol turned off the display. Do you understand now? Do you see why they are dangerous? The Kreth warlord spoke up. I see sentimentality, emotion. These things are weaknesses in battle. A warrior who mourns his fallen brothers cannot fight effectively. You are wrong, Cathrol said firmly. Completely wrong. Their mourning is not a weakness. It is the source of their strength. He stepped closer to the warlord's position. When a human soldier goes into battle, he does not fight for resources. He does not fight for territory. He does not even fight for survival. He fights because thousands of years of ancestors are watching him. He fights because every name on those walls demands that their sacrifice not be wasted. He fights because giving up would mean betraying everyone who died to bring him to that moment. Cathrol's voice grew stronger. You can kill a human. You can kill 1 million humans. But you cannot kill their memory. It will survive in their ships, in their archives, in the flames that never die. And every human who comes after will carry that loss forward. They will remember, and they will never stop coming. The chamber was silent. I stood in that room of 47 million names. I felt the weight of their dead, and I understood something terrible. A species that carries such burden, that refuses to forget a single soul lost in their climb to the stars, that species will never retreat. They will never surrender, because doing so would mean betraying not just the living, but all the dead who gave everything to bring them this far. He looked around at the assembled delegates. The Vorthic fight for glory. The Kreth fight for honor. The hegemony fights for resources. But humans? Humans fight for meaning, for the belief that every single life matters. that every sacrifice must be honored. That memory is worth dying for. He paused, and that makes them utterly terrifying. The Kreth warlord had lost his bored expression. He looked troubled now, uncertain. "What do you suggest we do?" asked the hegemony representative. "If humans are so dangerous, should we not act before they grow stronger?" Kethral laughed. It was not a happy sound, act. Attack them? That would be the worst possible mistake. Listen to me carefully. I have seen the heart of humanity. If you attack them, you do not weaken them. You strengthen them. Every human you kill becomes another name on those walls. Another reason for the living to fight harder. Another weight to carry forward. He shook his head slowly. You cannot defeat a species that turns its losses into fuel. You cannot break the will of people who see every death as sacred. Every attack you make gives them more to remember, more to avenge, more to carry between the stars. The chamber was completely silent now. Every delegate understood what Kethral was saying. The implications were profound. I recommend that the Galactic Council maintain peaceful relations with humanity for the next 1,000 years. At minimum, do not test them. Do not provoke them. Do not give them reasons to remember us as enemies. And if they turn on us? The Vorthik asked. If they decide to conquer? Kethral considered the question. Then pray. Pray that somewhere in their archives they find a reason for mercy. Because nothing in this galaxy can stop them if they choose to advance. They will carry their dead forward, an army of memory and fire, until every enemy is dust and every sacrifice is avenged. He stepped back from the podium. That is my report. That is what I learned aboard the Perseverance. That is why no species enters human Titan ships and returns unchanged. We return changed because we finally understand what we are facing. He looked at each delegate in turn. Not conquerors. Not destroyers. Witnesses. Keepers of memory. Carriers of the sacred dead. And they will never, ever forget. The council voted that day. The result was unanimous. Peaceful relations with humanity would be maintained for the next 1,000 years. No provocations. No tests. No conflicts. Some delegates thought Kethral was being dramatic. Others thought he was a coward. But enough of them had seen something in his eyes. Something haunted. Something that told them he was speaking truth. In the years that followed, Kethral often thought about his time on the Perseverance. He thought about Captain Vasquez and her quiet strength. About Margaret and her weekly flowers for a great-grandfather she never met. About the eternal flame that had burned for centuries. Sometimes, late at night, he would look up at the stars. He would imagine those great ships moving through the darkness, carrying their millions of names, their unbroken promises, their eternal vigilance. And he would wonder if any species in the cosmos truly understood what humanity had become. They were not the strongest species, not the most advanced, not the most numerous, but they were the ones who remembered. And in the end, Kethral realized that might be the most powerful thing of all, because empires fall, civilizations crumble, stars die. But memory endures. And as long as even one human ship sailed the void, carrying its wall of names and its eternal flame, those 47 million souls would never truly be gone. They would be watching, waiting, expecting the living to be worthy of their sacrifice, and humanity would spend eternity trying to prove that they were. That was the secret of the Titan ships. That was why no species entered and returned unchanged. And that was why, for the next 1,000 years, the galaxy would watch humanity with a mixture of fear and wonder, not because of what humans could destroy, but because of what they refused to forget.